In this lesson, we're going to be learning about deductive reasoning. There's two laws. One is the law of detachment. The other is the law of syllogism. So I'll give a basic understanding of what each one of those is. We'll start with the law of detachment, which says if P, then Q. That's how we read that. If that's a true conditional, and we know that we have P is true, then Q is true. So really what that means, as we look further on that, if we have a sentence like, if it is raining, then there is a cloud. Okay, so that makes sense because if there's a cloud, there must be, or if it's raining, it must be coming from somewhere. So that's if P, then Q. We kind of underline that here and identify that first statement as P. That's the if part, and then the conclusion is Q. Now, I look outside. I can't see the sky, but I can see it's raining. And so if it is raining, that already matches my original statement up here, so I label it P again. And I can also draw a conclusion from that. If I see that it's raining, even without seeing the cloud, there must be a cloud in the sky. I can make that conclusion. So if P, then Q, and I know that P is true, therefore I also know that Q must be true. So here's another example. If it's raining, then there's a cloud. Okay, that's P, then Q. But then I say there's a cloud. Does that guarantee that it's raining? Well, no, it doesn't follow my pattern, if P, then Q, and I have P. Instead, I've got Q again. And so this doesn't fit the law, and so I cannot draw a conclusion from that. Now, it might be raining, but I don't know for certain. So if I want to draw a valid conclusion, I'm going to look at the statement, if, right here, whatever it says, that's going to be my P, because it's with the if part. And then the then part, it divides the angle into two congruent angles. That will be my Q. So I look down here at the second part. I see BD bisects ABC. Now what I want to check, does that match what I had for P? If a ray is an angle bisector. So here BD, that is a ray. It's bisecting an angle. Therefore, yes, even though it's written differently, that is an angle bisector. So we're going to say BD bisects ABC is the same as P. But what it's doing here is it's giving a name for it. It's giving a name for the ray, and it's giving a name for the angle. That, when we attach it to a picture, also tells us, as we look at Q, okay, so therefore Q has to be true. But not only do we say that the angle ABC is now in two congruent angles, but we can look at the picture and identify exactly what those angles are. So we're following our law of detachment. If P, we have P, then Q. Q must be true. Now the next rule is the law of syllogism. Syllogism is more like connecting a chain. And as we have a chain here, we say if P then Q and Q then R are true conditionals, then we can kind of leave out the middle step because we're connecting. If we have P, we know we have Q. If we have Q, we know we have R. Therefore, if we have P, we know we have R. So we can connect it in a way that leaves out that middle step. Okay, so here's an example. If I'm using an umbrella, then it's raining. That's me. Maybe other people will use it for other reasons, but I'm saying I'm only going to use it when it's raining. So I'm going to identify my first part as P, then it's raining Q. The next sentence is the one that we used earlier for detachment. If Q, then R. If it's raining, then there's a cloud. So we check our form here. P was the original statement, and then we look at Q. The next one is a repeat of something, so I name it Q again because it's the same statement. And then I have a new statement again, so I use a new letter, and I'm going to be using R there. So therefore, by the law of syllogism, I can leave out the middle step, skip straight from P to R. If I'm using an umbrella, then there's a cloud. So again, P to Q, Q to R, therefore, just P to R, leaving out the middle step. Now we want to be careful when we do that. So if I have this one, if it's raining, then I'm using an umbrella. It's the same sentence that we started with. And then they said if it's raining, then there's a cloud. So this is where it's important to go ahead and label our letters as we go. If I label this as P, it's raining. I notice it's raining again. That's a repeat of P. And so I should see at that point that this is not fitting the form that we need. We need to have the Q repeating. And it's not the Q repeating, it's the P repeating. We cannot make a conclusion. Maybe it's raining, maybe there's a cloud. We don't know. There's no way to connect those two sentences. Okay, so if we want to use the law of syllogism to connect a couple of things, let's read this carefully. Notice there's going to be a law of syllogism because both of these are if-then statements. So the first one, if the symbol of a substance is Pb. So we're going to label that as P, and notice that's what we have here, symbol of a substance is Pb. The next part we can look at, then it is lead. That's the substance for it, that's Q. And so we're going to call Q a substance is lead. We look at the next part, we also have a substance is lead. That's the same thing we have here. The only difference is the word it, but it was talking about substance. So this is also Q here. So far, we're following syllogism. We noticed in the last step there then, we're looking at R. And so, I'm getting the atomic number is 82 for R. So if I wanted to connect this, this would follow the law of syllogism if I say, if a substance is lead, then its atomic number is 82. We also want to look carefully at this next one. Water can be represented by H2O. So we could say if water, then H2O, where we're looking at, this can be our P, water, H2O is Q. Now if we look at the next sentence though, notice it talks about hydrogen and oxygen, H and O, but it doesn't say how they're actually combined. It seems like we have the same parts, but they're not necessarily arranged in the same way. So this isn't really Q down here. This is something new. This is not saying the same thing, so we cannot use syllogism on this one. Sometimes we'll have a problem like this where we want to look, it says, does 3 follow from these statements? So we're going to look at statements 1 and 2 and find out, does 3 follow from either one of those laws? Now, notice the first sentence, vertical angles are congruent. So it's telling us something about vertical angles. I could say if angles are vertical, then they are congruent. So sometimes they won't necessarily say that if then, and we need to recognize that. So P is my vertical angles, Q can be my congruent. Notice the next one, 2 angles are congruent. Okay, that's matching here. Now vertical angles, we were talking about a pair, so that's 2. So we're going to call this Q. And then in the last part, then those angles measures are equal. That's a new statement. We don't have that before. So what is this following? Let's look. We have from P to Q for our first statement. Our second statement is Q to P. Oh, sorry, Q to R. Q to R for the second statement. And then the final statement, if we look carefully, 2 angles are vertical. Notice that's, again, looking at P. Then their measures are equal. That's what we had for R. And so this is connected, follows by the law of syllogism.